Hello and welcome. Now, as we all know, video games are rife with debate. From Horde versus Alliance to the old console wars, Sega versus Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, gamers are constantly facing a keyboard-smashing argument online. And that's where we enter with the Lenovo Legion Great Debate. We have brought together some of Australia's best gaming personalities from TV, esports, and their very own Twitch streams to argue some of the most persistent of questions. I am your host and moderator, David Quinny Quinn, just stick with Quinny, it's easier, from the Periodic Table of Awesome podcast, and I am extraordinarily excited to be here. In this episode, our teams will be straying further into my personal realm. They're gamers, I'm more of a roundabout kind of nerd. They're in my world now, and that is the world of pop culture, and they are debating that funny and wild comic book movies are better than dark and grounded ones. Or, as I like to think of it, witty versus gritty. Do we like the 60s Batman? Are we all about the Dark Knight? Are we talking about the dark grittiness of Deadpool or the fun and lols of Logan? And here is a warning for both teams. I will be docking points for any reference to Howard the Duck. Okay. You might recognise our affirmative team with their first speaker, Staphanie Hex Bendixsen. Geordie McAleer, or as we'll be calling him, Mac, is their second speaker, and Jordon Raskopoulos is their third speaker. There's a lot of Geordies today, so today she will be the friendliest of Geordies. They'll be facing off against the likes of Pete Curulli as first speaker, Jordon Elfishguy Mays, Elfishguy, yes, good, right, yes, and Nich Richardson, or Nichboy, bring it home as their third. They are equally matched and equally eager. Our teams are ready to convince you whether funny and wild comic book movies are in fact better than dark and grounded ones. And make sure you stick around till the end because we have some sweet prizes to give away as well. So without further ado, please welcome our first speaker for the affirmative to the screen. Staphanie Hex Bendixsen is a TV presenter, a speaker, a content creator, author, and Lenovo Legion brand ambassador. She's best known for her role on ABC TV's Good Game and Foxtel's Thrones 360. She now broadcasts on Twitch and presents Back Pocket, a video game variety show on Twitch and YouTube. But today, she's here to argue, and argue she will, that the Legion Great Debate begin.
Well, thank you. Good day to all, gamers, chairperson, legions of Lenovo Legion. Today we are here to discuss the lofty subject of whether or not funny and wild comic book movies are better than dark and grounded ones. Well, I'm here to tell you that we believe this to be true. My name is Staphanie and the first speaker for the affirmative, so I intend to ask you to question the very function of a comic book movie, the purpose it serves, how best it achieves that. Is it through joy and humour or despair? Our second speaker, Mac, will delve into the success of Marvel versus DC because if you read between the lines, I think we all know that's what this debate is really about. Our third speaker, Jordon, will discuss the future of comic book films and how best a comic book film serves to entertain and inspire its viewers. So let's dive right in. Why do we love comic book movies? What draws us to superheroes? The function of a comic book movie is to present us with a world not unlike our own that's facing hardship and shows us that that hardship can be overcome through heroism, positivity, and community. They serve as a moral barometer to show us right from wrong, good triumphing over evil. And that finding moments of humor and levity in times of darkness is vital to our sanity and survival. When we think about funny and wild versus dark and grounded, we're basically saying hopeful versus bleak. And while I understand that moments of seriousness are to create high stakes for the characters, and that's really important, ultimately, if the tone is too dreary, then it's hard for us to find those moments of pure and unfettered joy. There's a reason why Marvel has been so successful and DC has floundered. Marvel represents power through friendship, witty banter, and joy-filled camaraderie. DC's decidedly more emo approach has failed to capture the same enthusiasm in its fans. And I mean, I'll let Mac expand on that, but if it was ever a fight, we know who won and why. Thor Ragnarok is one of, if not the greatest comic book movie of all time, and that's largely due to Taika Waititi's irreverent script and razor-sharp humor. And it makes sense. I mean, when I think about my favorite superhero experiences at the movies, it's in the cinema, on opening night, with those wild action scenes packed full of glorious moments of hilarity between Thor and Captain America, Drax and Rocket, between Peter Parker and Tony Stark, when the audience cheers and hollers and erupts into thunderous applause, because the humor and the friendship that binds them together is always the thing that we want to see the most. It shows us our humanity, it binds our friendships, and it reminds us of the thing that we're fighting to protect. At the end of the day, when I go to see a comic book movie, I don't go to see Schindler's List. I go to see a Norse god from another dimension fighting aliens with a magic hammer. And that's the way it should be. Thank you.
Well done. A stellar start to the debate. Extra points for use of Taika Waititi, just because I love him. Also, Korg. Korg is possibly the greatest thing ever to be put on screen.
Agree.
Okay. I'm not showing any favoritism here, though. I just say solid start. And now we look to Pete Curulli to kick off the argument for the negative. Perth's radio gamer. Pete Curulli is a host of the Xavier, Jules and Pete show on Hit 92.9. Sorry, I'm going to do that again. On Hit 92.9. He's the founder of the games. Sorry, can I have a job? That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Sweet. Thank you. I'll call you after this. Okay. He is the founder of games content company Game on Oz, and he's the GM of Pentanet GG Esports. He's also recently added Lenovo Legion ePrentice Mentor to his list of accolades, something. He's done something. He's a mentor. Take it away, Pete.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Accoutrements, I reckon you could go with there. Just for a moment, could you imagine if it was Captain America rather than Captain America? I mean, I don't know how it would go, but anyway, there is one thing that I do want to say right off the bat here, and that is, does it come in black? I was sitting in a theatre watching Christian Bale as Batman in arguably the best comic book movie trilogy to have graced the screen as that line rang out. I had a chuckle. Humour at its best. A light as bright as the bat symbol against a sky of darkness. Funny is funny because of its juxtaposition against the dark. Chairperson, fellow speakers, viewers, funny and wild comic book movies are not better than dark and grounded ones. And that is what myself and my fellow heroes are here to discuss today. Batman and Robin, Captain America and the Falcon, Elfishguy and Nichboy. I'll leave my team to present the finer points of our argument, the facts and figures, if you will, that will help define what makes a comic book movie popular. But for us as a whole, what is funny and wild? What is dark and grounded? What is better than? To be better than is to be more desirable, to be satisfactory, to be more effective than what it is you are being measured against. And I guess in the span of what is relevant, i.e. the last 20 years of comic book movies, that you, the person watching right now, as a paying consumer will literally fork out your hard-earned cash to watch at a cinema, you might say funny and wild is Marvel, whilst dark and grounded is DC. Ergo, I mean, really, what we're asking here is Marvel better than DC? Or is it? If you're tossing it at sheer popularity of the brand, things like global domination at the box office, licensing, what sits in the top 10 on Rotten Tomatoes, it's a pretty clear win, isn't it? Marvel. The funny and wild comparison to DC makes up 9 out of the 10 highest grossing superhero films. Endgame, Infinity War, Avengers, Age of Ultron, Black Panther, Iron Man 3, Civil War, Spider-Man, Far From Home, Captain Marvel. But what if we stopped comparing Marvel to DC and instead just compared Marvel to Marvel? Marvel movies that you can define as funny and wild all of a sudden look a little bit different. Age of Ultron, Spider-Man Far From Home, and that's pretty much it. The rest might be wild, but certainly not funny. They're not comedies. They're actually dark and grounded. 8 out of the top 10 highest grossing films are dark and grounded. Funny and Wild is not better than Dark and Grounded. $12.1 billion worth of people at the box office cannot be wrong. Thank you very much.
Oh, snap!
Now, the thing I'm probably the most shocked at is how quickly this entire debate has just degenerated into Marvel versus DC. Congratulations.
It was inevitable.
Yeah, it was always going to happen. But, there are more comic book movies than just Marvel and DC. But hopefully somebody will look into that a little bit later on. Okay, let's keep the debate rolling. Next up is our second speaker for the affirmative. Geordie McAleer. I'm going to call you Mac from now on because there are just too many Geordies. You are the moustache of esports. I'm in awe. I'm absolutely in awe. Professional Counter-Strike commentator with an event resume covering IEM Sydney, ESL 1 Cologne, ESL Pro League, and Gfinity Elite Series. Professional cinematographer by trade and proud Twitch partner. Is there anything this man cannot do? One of the yarn spinners of the Esports Social Club podcast couch and chicken schnitzel lover. These things are very important. Also, big on the colourful shirts I see.
Yeah,
Mac.
big fan.
Yeah, I'm gobsmacked. Mac, take it away.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, moderator. Thank you, everyone, for coming to my TED Talk today. First off, I would just like to say thank you, Pete, for using everything I had initially and giving it for your side of the argument. Not sure why you've done that and really just reinforced my point before I've even made it. But, thank you very much,
Let's see.
Marvel, they're pretty good, aren't they? Just the fun, the light-hearted comedy that comes to your screen. And look, the people agree as well. If you have a look at Endgame alone, the number one grossing movie, the number one grossing comic book movie that has ever been made in the US, $2,797,800,564 US dollars. Domestically, that is $3 billion. It's almost 4 billion Australian dollars. That is completely ridiculous. And look, if it comes down to it, it is people putting the money exactly where their mouth is and showing that they like the lighthearted ones as well. What is it? You already said this one. I think it's like the top 4 Avengers movies. All the Avengers movies are the top 4 grossing movies. They're just so funny. They're so great to watch. And I couldn't think of a better way to pretty much start this one off. But look, I want to come down. I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to talk about my personal life. I studied filmmaking in uni. And I've been working in the industry for almost 10 years. So I feel like I have a very experienced and educated opinion on the matter. And look, personally, absolutely cannot stand half these DC movies. You sit there, it's like, oh yeah, they're all right. But if I'm here to be entertained, and look, when it comes to better than, which one's better than the other? What are you watching a movie for? It's to be entertained. So the way that entertainment is portrayed is through lighthearted and enthralling movies, just like Marvel brings to it. So look, Marvel taking on DC, yeah, we can discuss that all day, but really the discussion, it all ends up being just Marvel. So DC, they produce some films. Cool, great, that's awesome. Look, I'll give it to Aquaman. Aquaman was a pretty great film, but it's not that dark. It's still pretty funny. So when it comes down to it, even if it is a Marvel DC debate, we're still looking at the more entertaining, the more hilarious movies to take the cake. And really, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to conclude it there because I was a bit caught off guard, not going to lie, that Pete did start to make my points for me. So I feel like I've been droning on for way too long about the same points you've already heard. And thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thanks for doing our job for us.
I don't fully know how to moderate a thing where the debate teams are actually helping each other. But, that's fine. Let's just go with it. At any point in time, Pete, if you feel like you'd like this, like SWAT teams, that's fine. I'm pretty fast and loose with the rules around here.
No, that's fine. That's all good. I occasionally give a free kick to the opposing team knowing what's coming from mine. So that's perfectly fine, mate. That's okay.
I'm sorry, you spoke in a language I don't understand, which is sports. It just came out of... but that's essentially how I see most people. Anyway, now our next speaker is somebody who we had a bio that we actually had to cut down, but they are offering the meat of the negative this round. We have Jordon Elfishguy Mays. He is an esports commentator with one of the best resumes in Australia. I don't know whether he's any god, but he's got an amazing resume. And the greater Asia Pacific region. He has been commentating for over 6 years, covering a wide range of games, including Counter-Strike, Fortnite, Overwatch, World of Tanks, PUBG, Crossfire, Hearthstone, and Team Fortress 2. That's a lot of games. Do you play them all?
I have, at one point in time, played all of those games.
Oh, stop lying.
That's a lot of games.
You're just jealous, Mac.
Elfishguy, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Quinny. Yeah, of course, looking forward to this because, Mac, you know, what you just said to Pete obviously seems to ring true with now your argument to mine. I feel like you've sort of set me up a little bit for what I'm going to say. So I don't even think there's necessarily much of a need to rebut you because I feel like my whole argument here kind of rebuts you. Now, to start off with, can I just say, funny and wild personality traits, they might be good in people, just like you, Mac, just like our first speaker, Pete, just like your shirt, but I'm not sure that they translate quite as well to movies. Thinking towards the Marvel movies, the ones that you sort of mentioned, the Avengers, these kinds of things, they don't necessarily even exist without what I'm going to talk about. And I think it's prudent to start by discussing the comic book movie genre from the outset. We go back to our childhood again. You did it, Mac. It's my turn now as well. During my childhood, comic book movies were always weird, wacky, a little bit fun, but they were never good, and they certainly weren't blockbusters. It might be fun to watch Batman running around in a leotard, but it doesn't necessarily inspire audiences, nor does it build a legacy. In 2004, all of that changed with the rise of dark and grounded comic book movies. Dark Knight, for example, smashed records. It became the highest grossing movie of 2008. It was the highest grossing comic book movie of all time at the time. It's one of the movies that stands the test of time as well, as Pete has sort of alluded to in his argument. It still continues to be mentioned in the best of all time discussions and arguably is still the best of all time. This, in turn, legitimized the genre for both audiences and the film industry, paving the way for what was essentially to become a money printer for film studios in the future. The success of the entire genre hinges on the dark and grounded comic book movies. The light cannot exist without the dark. Not only did the dark and grounded comic book movies save the comic book movie genre, they also gave us, the audience, a more critical and introspective look at our existence. Rather than being movies created purely for entertainment, as your first speaker has alluded to, the fun factor sort of dark and grounded comic book movies can take a bit more of a realistic and correct look at what our life might be like if these heroes existed in the real world. By doing this, they add intimacy, relatability for the audiences, whose suspension of disbelief is not necessarily required to work on overdrive like they would with the more funny and lighthearted comic book movies. What about the success of these kinds of movies from a more data-driven standpoint? Look towards maybe Joker, a movie that was rated R, therefore cutting out a large portion of its potential audience by virtue of the fact that they weren't even old enough to go and see it. And yet, it still grossed over $1 billion worldwide. You can compare that to something like maybe Guardians of the Galaxy, a more lighthearted take on the comic book movies, which, by the way, had a budget 3 times the size of Joker and only grossed $770 million. So, I don't know. I kind of feel like the numbers do speak for themselves. Audience, they kind of want these dark and grounded comic book movies. Movies with a profound message that resonate with audiences and leave them thinking more about the content after the movies are finished. They force them to critically look at themselves and how they view the world. Maybe that's something that you need to do if you think light and funny comic book movies are better than dark and grounded ones, because that quite clearly isn't the case.
Drop the mic.
Wow.
No.
Bravo, sir. Bravo.
What did he say?
God, that's why we're paying him
didn't catch that
80%
one.
of our team's salary.
I have the very difficult thing of anytime people start talking in numbers and they start quoting numbers at me as reasons, I just don't understand them, because numbers, they're a bit like smells. You know, they become words and colors all at once. I don't know what that is. It may be a psychological problem. I don't know. But an excellent argument. Thank you very much. I really appreciated you bringing up Joker, because that's a film that I'm pleased to say I'm never going to watch again. Okay. Right. Jordon Raskopoulos is a comedian, singer, yeah, that you. An improviser, a character actor, a voiceover artist, and a variety streamer, which is an exciting one. A 21st century bard. Jordon is best known for her work as the lead singer of the comedy band The Axis of Awesome and her TEDx talk on high-functioning anxiety, and, of course, the throwing a book at Michael Bolton in a commercial. Well done for that. I think we've all wanted to do that at some point in time. Nowadays, she spends most of her time on Twitch broadcasting interactive comedy, games, and music shows, except for today, because today she will be bringing the affirmatives case to a close as the third and final speaker for the affirmative team. Take it away, Jordon.
Hello, friends. I don't think I need to do much here. Hex made a fantastic introduction, talked about the function of comic books, movies in society and their importance to people. Mac didn't need to do much at all. All he needed to do was reinforce the negatives argument that lighter movies are more financially successful. Now, the first speaker for the negative did a very interesting thing. They decided to focus away from DC movies, and they said, let's compare Marvel movies to Marvel movies, thus abandoning the darkest and grittiest of the superhero genre. This is a logical fallacy called realigning the goalposts. Yes, indeed. There needs to be darkness to contrast the light, I agree. But you have abandoned the darkness to focus on, at best, the dimly lit. Now, if you are going to argue the darkness, you must adopt the darkness. Nay, you simply cannot adopt the darkness. You must be born in it. The second speaker.
Still more audible than the movie.
The second speaker spoke about the goofiness of the older superhero movies, comparing Joker with Guardians of the Galaxy. And yes, you can pluck statistics from two individual movies and make that kind of comparison. But again, that is a logical fallacy called cherry-picking data. Now, we have seen superhero franchises evolve since the 70s and 80s. From the camp Flash Gordon with its soundtrack by Queen, and Tim Burton's pop-punk gothic Batman, and its sequels, aka The Nightmare Before Christian Bale. And we've seen the evolution of these two camps over time. And now we are in a position where we have the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and we have the other stuff. Yes, there are dark and gritty comic book movies that are good, even award-worthy. I'm not denying that, but are they better? Well, my first and second speakers have examined the past and the present of the genre. I want to look towards the future. If we follow the progression of these camps through time, there's something interesting we notice. You did point out that the comical movies of the past were a bit lackluster, and I don't disagree. But they have evolved over time. Their wit has become sharper. Yeah, they have a greater idea of society and what makes us tick. Something very interesting there. Intertextuality. The dark and gritty movies, they just seem to be getting darker and grittier. Batman's voice gets more and more gruff. And it seems that in order to meet the need for grittiness and realism, they start to strip away the very things that make comic book movies comic book movies. What if superheroes were just like real people? What if they had problems? What if they didn't even have powers? What if they were just normal people trying to get by? What if they had feelings and relationships and inner turmoil? What if they didn't even wear masks? And it seems that this is the natural progression. In order to get darker and grittier, we have to strip away everything comic book from the comic book genre until we are left with the story of a man putting on a disguise in order to deal with his divorce and spend time with his children. And as we all know, that is the plot of Mrs. Doubtfire. The natural progression of dark and gritty movies is Mrs. Doubtfire, and we have already had Mrs. Doubtfire. Do we need it again? Perhaps. Perhaps in this world of pandemics, global recession, social distancing, unrest and intolerance, perhaps Mrs. Doubtfire is the comic book movie we deserve. But it's not the comic book movie we need right now. Thank you.
Wow. Inspired.
Do we need a remake of Mrs. Doubtfire. I'll let Mrs. Doubtfire herself answer. Oh, no, dear.
Oh, very good puppets.
Oh, Puppet, what are you doing over there? Oh, look, and a brief moment of pause for Robin Williams, who actually starred in his own comic book movie a very long time ago as Popeye. Most of you have never seen it, and there's a very good reason for that. Okay. With one speaker left, we have Nich Richardson, Nichboy, ready to close the debate. Nich is one of the country's most talkative talkers about video games. From Good Game to Screenplay, hosting the League of Legends Oceanic Pro League, to starting Back Pocket, he literally never shuts up about video games, which is a good thing considering this is a debate. So now it is your job to talk the talk, no longer walking the walk. Without further ado, Nich!
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind the first team, who have clearly been floundering and grasping at straws this entire debate, as proven by their second and third speakers, constantly saying, I don't need to do much here. You do, affirmative team, because you live in a fantasy world. You are asking us to bury our heads in the sand, to remove ourselves from the realities of the world to some sort of utopian fairy world where Thor can save your life. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Thor's not coming. Thor's getting his tan on in Byron Bay, living off the money you paid to have the wool covered over your eyes. Now, the second speaker said that films are supposed to be entertaining. But are the highest rated films of all time entertaining? Would you consider The Passion of Joan of Arc entertaining? Would you consider 2001, A Space Odyssey entertaining? Is Citizen Kane entertaining? No! Those films are boring as shit, but they are recognized as being some of the greatest films of all time. I would like to remind the audience of what my esteemed first speaker said. Marvel, the dominant force in comic book films, only got good once they started taking themselves seriously. Endgame might have jokes in it, but make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, this is a dark film. This is a film about genocide, about PTSD, about loss, about the death of the most iconic character in Marvel's cinematic history. And yes, I probably should have said spoiler warning before I said that. If the first team believe that this is funny or wild, then I would put to you, Mr. Head Speaker, or Your Majesty, or whatever I'm supposed to call you, Quinny, that the first team are emotionally unstable and are a danger to themselves and society writ large. Gritty has stakes. Funny and wild doesn't have inherent stakes, because if the characters aren't taking their own story seriously, how are we supposed to? Now, I'd also like to remind everyone of the point brought up by my learned and esteemed second speaker, that dark comic book films paved the way for the success of the later films. But I would argue that my dear friend Talker number 2 didn't go far enough, because not only do dark and grounded films pave the way, they also right the ship. The Achilles heel of the wild and wacky comic book film is when it gets too wild, too wacky. It loses itself up its wacky ass. Grounded films bring us back from the nightmare that was Batman getting rubber nipples and a credit card. Because I watched Batman Forever a couple of days ago, ladies and gentlemen, and you're welcome for me taking that bullet instead of you. And the very first line Batman says in objectively the third worst Batman film of all time according to Rotten Tomatoes is Alfred says to him, "Shall I pack you a sandwich, sir?" To which Batman replies, "No, I'll get drive-through." Not in that car, you won't, buddy. It's so low to the ground you won't be able to reach the cashier. And to get the food, the whole top of the car has to open up like you're opening a tub of yogurt, exposing your vulnerable bat nipples to the Joker dressed as a McDonald's drive-thru cashier. And we've all been to a McDonald's drive-thru. They have that really tight bend after you order and you're going to pick up your food. There's no way the Batmobile's getting around that without scratching the paint off. Nolan's films reset that timeline. They brought it back to something relatable, something that can grow in a new direction. Plants need pruning to keep them fresh and vital. A dark and grounded comic book film is the horticulture that allows wacky and wild stories to be told. Are wild and wacky comic book films more fun? Perhaps. But are they better for the genre? Most certainly not. And Your Majesty, if the first team do believe that, then maybe they need a reboot of themselves.
Oh, get around him. Get around him. Yes.
Pathetic.
Can you trust a man that says yogurt?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're wearing a pineapple shirt. I don't know what you're talking about.
Wacky ass.
The whole opposition argument hinges on the idea that the highest grossing films are dark and gritty ones, just abandoning the words comic book altogether. Very convenient, I think.
Hang on a sec. I believe the time's up.
That argument there is like saying manure is better than flowers because it helps flowers grow. It's ridiculous.
Look, I'm struggling to take any of it seriously since you used the phrase yogurt whilst describing the Batmobile.
Can I just say, I've never said
I'm-
yogurt before in my life. I usually say yogurt. I don't know what happened.
It's the British way of saying it.
Very interesting choice, and I think we're all regretting it.
It's the blazer.
Yeah,
Blazer.
it is also something I'm going to have to pull you up on that you referenced Batman Forever, and the bad guys were Two-Face and the Riddler, so the Joker would not have been attacking the Bat Nipples at all. In fact, the Joker was dead by that point. So,
Are you even allowed
sorry,
to join this conversation, Quinny? I don't think so.
maybe, but I'm a nerd. And you are in my world now. I am a comic book nerd. If I could move the camera, you would see the amount of crap around me that is comic book paraphernalia. And if you don't get it right, I get annoyed. But that's okay. We have now heard both sides of this argument. One of them was comprehensively wrong on some topic. No, I can't be that partisan. I'm sorry. We have heard both sides of this argument, and they have both had very good points. Are the darker and gritty ones really righting the ship? Are the fun and crazy ones the natural state of being for comic book movies? Essentially, what we're looking at here is the recorrection of Justice League. Do we go with the Justice League, or are we talking about the dark and gritty Snyder Cut? Do we even care about that film anymore? Have you watched it recently? It's terrible. Anyway, has either side swayed you? I know where I stand, and I'm going to put it this way. If you got to the end of the Logan and they put the X on the thing and you didn't cry, you have no heart. So, as surprising as it may be, I'm kind of loving the dark and gritty, but also, hey, I didn't say you won. I'm just saying that's where I'm at.
Kind of sounds like it, though.
Yeah.
It did sound
It
like
does.
that a lot. I'm not going to lie. However, I'm not the one-
Unconscious bias is what it sounds like.
It's not bias. I am offended at the mere concept that I may be biased in any way, shape, or form. However,
You're constantly referencing your own bias.
Yeah. It's supposed to be adjudicating a debate, not telling us your favourite things.
okay, fine, whatever, cool. But it doesn't come down to me anyhow. It's the people in the chat. They are the ones who will make the final decision. So the debate isn't over. The debate is going to continue online, possibly forever, but also in the comment section below. So I would like you to please go crazy wherever you may be sitting at home for all of the people who are in this wonderful debate. Give yourselves a huge round of applause. You can point at each other. You can just... Oh, yeah. Let's have a round of applause for the affirmative, for their excellent, excellent arguments. Yes. And a round of applause for the negative, for their questionable arguments that I just kind of happen to agree with. Okay. And now, even better, Lenovo Legion have also teamed up with Intel to offer you the chance to play the newly released game, Marvel's Avengers. Is it dark and gritty? Is it wild and funny? I don't know. It's on your computer though. So come up with your own argument as to why or why not funny and wild comic book movies are better than dark and grounded ones, and tell us in the comments, wherever they may be, and we'll give the best argument a code. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guys, gals, non-binary pals, thank you so much for joining us. This has been the Lenovo Legion Great Debate, and we will see you again soon.